The morning began like any other for Jennifer Matthews. At 28, she had left the United States Navy just 6 months prior, still carrying within her that military discipline that never leaves those who serve. Her uniform was stored at the back of her closet, but her upright posture, direct gaze, and the way she folded her clothes with surgical precision betrayed her years of service. Now, she worked in a coffee shop in San Diego, serving lattes and cappuccinos to civilians who would never know what she had done, never understand the missions she had carried out in distant waters. Jennifer had enlisted at 18, fleeing a home where love was scarce and expectations even lower. Her mother, Margaret Matthews, was a bitter woman who saw her daughter as a constant reminder of unfulfilled dreams. When Jennifer announced she would join the Navy, Margaret merely shrugged and muttered something about wasting her life. But Jennifer proved to be exceptional. She excelled in everything from navigation to advanced communication systems. She was trained in special operations, learned 5 languages, and became an expert in cryptography and naval intelligence. By the age of 24, she had already participated in classified missions that saved lives and prevented international conflicts. But then came that last mission. The ship she served on was sent to the South China Sea, a tense region where every move was watched by multiple nations. During a nighttime reconnaissance operation, something went wrong. There was an explosion, water flooding compartments, screams cutting through the darkness. Jennifer saved 3 members of her team, dragging them through flooded corridors as the metal groaned around them. But she couldn't save the 4th, a 22-year-old named David Brennan, who was trapped when an armored door jammed. She could hear his screams through the thick steel, could feel the icy water rising on the other side. And then, silence. Officially, she was decorated for heroism. Unofficially, she couldn't sleep without seeing David's face, without hearing those screams. Navy psychologists called it post-traumatic stress. Jennifer called it failure. 6 months ago, she requested and received an honorable discharge. She returned to San Diego, trying to find something resembling a normal life. The coffee shop was run by a man named Richard Torres, a former corporate executive who had bought the establishment after an expensive divorce and a midlife crisis. He was the kind of boss who compensated for his own insecurity by humiliating employees. Jennifer endured his sarcastic comments and constant criticism because she needed the money and because, in a way, the punishment seemed appropriate. She didn't deserve any better, not after David. That particular morning, the coffee shop was especially busy. It was a Friday, and customers were queuing up to the door. Jennifer was working at the brisk pace she'd learned in the Navy, preparing drinks with military efficiency. But Richard was in a bad mood, perhaps because of an argument with his ex-wife, perhaps simply because he could be. He criticized her for every little thing, his sharp voice piercing through the hum of the espresso machine. That's when Margaret Matthews walked into the cafeteria. Jennifer hadn't seen her in months since she got home from work. Her mother looked older, more stooped, with deep lines around her mouth. Margaret approached the counter with that familiar look of disapproval, as if Jennifer were a perpetual disappointment. Before they could exchange a word, Richard appeared beside Jennifer, holding a glass with a small stain on the rim. His face was red, veins bulging on his neck. He began to shout, calling Jennifer incompetent, useless, a pathetic employee who couldn't even do the simplest job correctly. Other employees stopped. Customers fell silent, all watching the public humiliation. Margaret watched with something that might have been satisfaction, as if it confirmed everything she had always known about her daughter. Richard didn't stop. He continued, his voice rising an octave, talking about how he'd made a mistake hiring her, how she was a loser who would never amount to anything. Jennifer stood there, rigid, absorbing each word as if they were bullets. She'd weathered storms at sea, operated under enemy fire, but somehow this petty humiliation in a rundown coffee shop hit her differently. Finally, Richard uttered the word, "You're fired. Take your things and get out of my cafeteria." Margaret said nothing, only watched with that look that said, "I told you so." Jennifer began to untie her apron, her fingers trembling slightly when the sound began. At first, it was distant, just a faint hum that quickly grew in intensity. The windows of the coffee shop began to shake. Customers looked up, confused. The sound transformed into a thunderous roar that made cups vibrate on the tables. Jennifer recognized it immediately. It was the unmistakable sound of a military helicopter, and it was close, very close. She rushed to the window along with dozens of others. And there it was, a U.S. Navy Ches-60 Seahawk helicopter, descending straight into the small parking lot next to the cafeteria. The wind created by the rotors sent debris flying, making cars sway and people duck. The helicopter landed with impressive precision in a space that seemed too small, its rotors still spinning as the side. Door opened. 2 men in Navy flight uniforms jumped out, followed by an officer Jennifer recognized immediately. It was Commander James Patterson, a man she had worked with on 3 different missions. An officer known for his cold competence and impossible demands. He had military-cut gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He scanned the cafeteria with his gaze, found Jennifer, and walked directly toward her. The cafeteria door flung open, and Commander Patterson entered with his 2 companions. Everyone in the cafeteria froze, watching this surreal intrusion. Richard Torres seemed to have swallowed his tongue, his face alternating between red and white. Margaret was completely still, her mouth agape in silent shock. "Lieutenant Matthews," Patterson said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Your presence is requested immediately. Critical situation, maximum classification. You have 90 seconds to decide if you're coming with us." Jennifer felt the world tilt. Lieutenant Matthews. She hadn't been called that in months. She looked at Patterson, at the men beside her, at the helicopter waiting outside. Then she looked at Richard, still pale, and at her mother, whose expression had changed from disdain to something close to astonishment. "Commander," she began, her voice firmer than I expected, "I'm no longer on active duty. I was discharged 6 months ago." Patterson pulled a sealed envelope from his uniform pocket and handed it to her. "Your discharge has been suspended under federal authority. Section 12,304 of the United States. You are being reactivated for immediate duty under direct orders from Naval Special Operations Command. The details are here, but we don't have time for you to read them now. The situation is urgent, Matthew. We need you." Jennifer picked up the envelope with hands that no longer trembled. Something inside her, something that had been dormant and wounded, began to awaken. She looked again at Richard, who now seemed tiny and insignificant. She looked at Margaret, who finally showed some emotion beyond disapproval, perhaps fear, perhaps respect, perhaps just confusion. "What's the situation?" Jennifer asked, her voice taking on that professional tone she thought she'd left behind. "Classified," Patterson replied. "But it involves your specific skills in cryptography and intelligence. We have a 16-hour operational window. Every minute counts. Are you coming?" Jennifer didn't hesitate any longer. She took off her apron completely, threw it on the counter in front of Richard, and nodded. "I'm ready, Commander. You have 30 seconds to grab anything essential," Patterson said. Nothing more. Jennifer ran to the back of the cafeteria, grabbed her small bag from a locker. Inside was her old military ID, something she had never been able to throw away. When she returned, Patterson was already moving toward the door. She followed him, aware of all eyes on her. As she passed her, "Mother!" Margaret finally spoke, her voice weak. "Jennifer?" Jennifer paused for just a second. "Take care of yourself, Mom," she said without any particular emotion, and then went out the door. The wind from the propellers hit her like a physical wall. Patterson and his men quickly guided her to the helicopter. Hands helped her aboard, and before she could fully process it, she was seated in the familiar interior of a Seahawk, a helmet being placed on her head, and a seatbelt being fastened. Patterson sat beside her, speaking rapidly on the radio. The helicopter took off before the door was fully closed, climbing in a sharp curve that pressed Jennifer against her seat. Through the window, she saw the cafeteria shrinking below her, saw the crowd gathered in the parking lot looking up, saw Margaret standing alone near the entrance, just a tiny figure. "Full briefing in 20 minutes, Patterson said through the intercom. "But here's the basics. 3 days ago, we intercepted coded communications suggesting a coordinated attack against naval installations in multiple locations. The code is unlike anything we've ever seen, but it has similarities to a system you helped decipher 2 years ago during Operation Silent Depth. Cadifer remembered it had been a mission in the Indian Ocean, tracking a terrorist cell that was trying to compromise naval navigation systems. She spent 3 weeks practically without sleep, working through layers of encryption until she finally cracked the code. The information they obtained saved an aircraft carrier from a potential attack. "We think it's the same group," Patterson continued, "or at least someone using the same cryptographic architecture. They've evolved the system, but you're the only person who understands the fundamental structure. Our best analysts have tried and failed. You're our last resort, Matthews." The helicopter gained altitude, turning west toward the ocean. San Diego stretched out below, a grid of streets and buildings that quickly gave way to the endless blue expanse of the Pacific. Jennifer felt something inside her realign, as if disconnected pieces were returning to their places. For 6 months, she had felt lost, a soldier without a war, a specialist without purpose. She had punished herself for not saving David, had accepted mediocrity as penance. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a place where she belonged, where her skills meant something, where she could make a difference. "Where are we going?" she asked. "USS Theodore Roosevelt," Patterson replied. "It's positioned 200 miles offshore. You'll have full access to our intelligence center and all available technology. We've assembled a team, but you'll be in charge of the decryption operation." Jennifer nodded, already beginning to mentally organize what she would need. If it was indeed based on the silent depth system, she knew where to start. 2 years was a long time in cryptography. The enemy would have evolved, added layers, changed protocols. "What's the deadline?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. 16 hours from now. "Maybe less," Patterson said. "Intelligence suggests the attack is scheduled for midnight, Guam local time. If we can't decipher the communications and identify the targets before then, we could lose critical facilities and hundreds of lives." Jennifer closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. 16 hours. She had worked under less. She had operated under impossible pressure before. But this was different. She wasn't just returning to service. She was returning after having failed, after having lost someone. The last time she had been under extreme pressure, David died. As if reading his thoughts, Patterson spoke again, his voice softer. "I know about what happened in the South China Sea, Matthews. I read the entire report. You saved 3 lives that night. 3 sailors returned home because of you. No one could have saved Specialist Brennan. The door was locked from the outside due to structural damage. Not even you could change that." Jennifer opened her eyes, looking at Patterson. It was the first time anyone had said those words to her so directly. Psychologists had danced around the subject, using careful language about survivors' guilt and trauma. But Patterson simply stated the truth. She couldn't have changed it. "I should have been faster," she said quietly. "If you had gone, you would have died. 2 and then 3 other families would be planning funeral," Patterson replied. "You did what you could. More than that, you did the impossible. That's why we're here, Matthew. Because when things are impossible, you're the one who can make them happen." The helicopter continued its journey over the ocean. Jennifer looked out the window, seeing only water stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, somewhere in that vast ocean, people were planning violence. They were coding messages, coordinating attacks, putting lives in danger. And she had 16 hours to stop them. She thought of Richard Torres, of his red face and his cruel words. She thought of her mother, standing in the parking lot with that shocked expression. She thought of the coffee shop, of the mornings serving coffee people who would never know her name. 6 months of self-imposed penance, of hiding who she really was. But perhaps penance had never been the point. Perhaps the point was to move on, to continue serving, to continue using her talents to protect people. David Brennan was dead, and that was a tragedy she would carry forever. But there were hundreds of other people who were still alive, who needed her to succeed now. "I'm ready, Commander," she said, and this time there was certainty in her voice. "We're going to get those bastards." Patterson smiled, just a slight movement of her lips. "Welcome back, Lieutenant Matthews. We missed you." The helicopter cut through the blue sky, carrying Jennifer Matthews back to the world where she belonged, where her abilities had meaning, where she could make a difference. Behind her, in a San Diego coffee shop, a small man wondered how he had lost control so completely, and a mother stood alone, finally beginning to understand that her daughter had never been the failure she imagined, but rather an extraordinary person the world needed. The ocean stretched endlessly below, full of dangers and possibilities, and Jennifer was returning home. The USS Theodore Roosevelt appeared on the horizon like a floating city of steel and purpose. Jennifer had served on aircraft carriers before, but the sight always impressed her. Over 300 meters long, displacing nearly 100,000 tons, the ship was a demonstration of power and engineering. Dozens of aircraft were arranged on the flight deck, and she could see personnel moving in coordinated patterns, each person performing their function with choreographed precision. The helicopter began its approach, and Jennifer felt that familiar anticipation growing in her chest. The Seahawk descended smoothly, touching the deck with only a slight bump. Before the propellers had even stopped spinning completely, the door was open, and Patterson was gesturing for her to get out. She jumped onto the deck, the sea breeze hitting her face, carrying that characteristic smell of salt, aviation fuel, and metal. A reception team was already waiting, led by a uniformed woman whom Jennifer recognized immediately. Captain Sarah Chun, an intelligence officer with whom Jennifer had briefly worked 3 years earlier during exercises in the Mediterranean. Chun was known for her brilliant analytical mind and her complete lack of patience for incompetence. "It's Matthews," Chun said, extending her hand. Her expression was serious, devoid of welcoming smiles. "Thank you for coming so quickly. The situation is worse than we initially thought." As they hurried through the narrow corridors of the aircraft carrier, Chun began to explain. They descended steep staircases, past compartments where sailors worked on complex equipment, and traversed areas where the smell of food from the mess hall mingled with the omnipresent odor of oil and electronic. 3 days ago, Chun began, our listening station in Okinawa intercepted an encrypted transmission using commercial satellites. Initially, it appeared to be just digital noise, but our algorithms detected patterns consistent with intentional communication. When we finally isolated the signal and began preliminary analysis, we realized it had structural similarities to the system you broke during Silent Depth. Jennifer processed each word, her mind already working on the problem. "How many transmissions have we intercepted since then?" 17, Chun replied, all using different satellites, different frequencies, but the same basic encryption architecture. Whoever is behind this is sophisticated. They are rotating protocols, using proxy servers and burying their communications within legitimate internet traffic. They arrived at a heavy steel door with armed guards on either side. Chun swiped an identification card, placed her hand on a biometric scanner, and typed in a 6-digit code. The door unlocked with a deep sound and opened, revealing what was essentially the ship's intelligence brain. The room was dominated by rows of computer workstations, each with multiple screens displaying cascading data. Analysts worked intensely, their fingers flying across keyboards, their eyes fixed on patterns and numbers that meant life or death. In the center of the room was a conference table surrounded by larger screens showing maps, timelines, and what appeared to be failed attempts at decoding. Jennifer immediately recognized several of the analysts. There was Lieutenant Marcus Rivera, a computational linguistics expert who had worked with her at Pearl Harbor Petty. Officer Janet Kim, a mathematical genius who could see patterns where others saw only chaos. And tech specialist Brian Foster, a young prodigy who understood computer systems as if he had been born inside one. Rivera looked up when Jennifer entered, and her face lit up. "Matthew, thank God. We've been banging our heads against the wall for 2 days. This code is a nightmare." Jennifer approached the central table where Chun was projecting examples of the intercepted transmissions onto the larger screens. It was plain encrypted text, seemingly random sequences of characters that meant nothing to the untrained eye. But Jennifer didn't have an untrained eye. She had spent 2 years studying advanced cryptography, had a master's degree in applied mathematics, and possessed that rare kind of mind that could see order in. She studied the screens in silence for almost 5 minutes, her brain absorbing pattern, character frequency, possible underlying structures. The others respecting her process. Finally, she spoke. "Have you tried a polyalphabetic substitution approach with temporal rotation?" Sure, Rivera replied. We tried Vigenère, Beaufort, variants of Vernum. Nothing worked. And what about stream cryptography based on pseudorandom number generation? First 12 hours, Kim said. We tried LFSR, Trivium, even custom implementation. No match. Jennifer nodded, continuing to study the data. The silent depth system she had broken 2 years ago was based on a clever hybrid architecture. It combined classical cryptography with quantum element, using superposition principles to generate keys that changed dynamically. But that had only been the beginning. Whoever was behind the current system had evolved the concept. I need to see the raw transmissions, she said, unfiltered, unprocessed, exactly as they were received. Foster began working on his terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Within seconds, raw data began to fill one of the main screens. Jennifer moved closer, almost touching the screen with her nose, examining every byte. There was something there, something on the edges, in the spaces between the data, an almost subliminal quality that his instincts recognized, even though his conscious mind couldn't yet articulate it. It was like hearing a familiar melody played on a different instrument. They're using steganography, she said suddenly, hiding data within data. The encryption you're seeing isn't the real message. It's an obfuscation layer designed to make you waste resources trying to break it. Chon leaned forward, intrigued. Go on. Jennifer pointed to specific patterns in the data sequences. Look here. This repetition every 256 bytes. And here, this entropy anomaly. It's not noise, it's information deliberately inserted. They are using the visible encryption channel as a distraction, while the real communication is hidden in the least significant bits of the transmissions themselves. Son of a bitch, Foster. It's brilliant. Even if someone broke the external encryption, they'd only find garbage. Exactly. Jennifer confirmed. The real message is in the shadows. We need to extract those hidden bits first, then deal with the actual encryption. Kim was already working, creating extraction algorithms. How much time do you need? Chen asked. Jennifer glanced at the clock on the wall. Almost 2 hours had passed since the helicopter picked her up from the cafeteria. There were approximately 14 hours left until midnight in Guam to extract the hidden data, initial analysis, identify the actual encryption system, and then crack it? She was looking at least 8 hours of intense work, and that was assuming everything went perfectly. 10 hours, she said. Maybe less if we're lucky. But I need full access to the system, the authority to request any necessary computing resources, and no interruption. Chun nodded. You have all of this. Patterson has already authorized it. You're in charge of this operation, Matthew. Whatever you need, you get. Jennifer felt the weight of that responsibility. Not only her career, but potentially hundreds of lives depended on what she would do in the next few hours. She thought briefly about David Brennan, about how she hadn't been able to save him. But this was different. Here, she had time. She had the tools. She had an exceptional team. Okay, she said, turning to the analyst. Rivera, I need you to set up a parallel linguistic analysis environment. If we can extract the message, it could be in any language or even invented code. Kim, work with me on the steganographic extraction. Foster, prepare 3 redundant decoding systems. If we identify the encryption method, I want to be able to attack it from multiple angles simultaneously. The team moved immediately, each person focusing on their task. Jennifer sat at a main workstation, flexed her fingers, and immersed herself in the work. The first few hours were pure technical analyses. Jennifer and Kim worked through the transmissions byte by byte, building algorithms to identify and extract the hidden steganographic data. It was tedious work, requiring absolute concentration. Each transmission had to be processed individually, patterns had to be confirmed, and extracted data had to be validated. Coffee appeared beside her at regular intervals, brought by assistants whose sole function was to keep the team running. Jennifer drank without looking, her eyes glued to the screen. Numbers flowed, patterns emerged, and slowly, very slowly, the hidden message began to reveal itself. 3 hours after it began, they had extracted data from all 17 transmissions. What emerged was not text, but binary sequences that clearly contained structured information. It was like looking at a book written in an alien alphabet. You knew it meant something, but you couldn't read it. Jennifer stepped away from the screen, rubbing her eyes. Her head throbbed, but she ignored it. Pain was irrelevant. Only results mattered. Analyze the structure, she instructed. Look for delimiters, start and end markers, anything that suggests internal organization. Foster took over, performing statistical analyses on the extracted data. After 20 minutes, he had results. It has a defined structure. There appear to be 18 distinct segments separated by specific marker sequences. Each segment has variable length, but they all follow a similar pattern. 18 segments, Jennifer murmured. A significant number. Possibly 18 targets or 18 operational cells. Chun, who had been silently observing, approached. If there are 18 targets, we need to identify them. We have naval installations in Guam, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines. Any of them could be a target. Jennifer knew. The operational window was closing. They had approximately 9 hours left. She looked at the extracted data, at those 18 mysterious segments that contained potentially vital information. We need to break the encryption, she said, right now. The next step was to identify the encryption system used in the extracted data. Jennifer began by applying frequency tests, entropy analysis, and randomness checks. The results were frustrating. The system was exceptionally well designed. There were no obvious patterns, no apparent weaknesses. She tried classical mathematical approaches. Fourier analysis, detect hidden periodicities. Wavelet transforms to identify features at multiple scales. Number theory 2, look for prime relationships. Nothing yielded useful results. 2 hours passed. Then 3. Jennifer felt the pressure mount. Chun received regular updates from higher command. The tension in the room was palpable. Each passing minute was a minute closer to midnight, closer to the potential attack. Then Jennifer had an intuition. During silent depth, the encryption system had used quantum principles but not true quantum cryptography. It was a clever simulation that used quantum concepts within a classical framework. What if this evolved version did something similar but with increased complexity? She began searching for signatures of post-quantum cryptography algorithms, systems designed to withstand attacks from quantum computers, using lattice mathematics, error-correcting codes, and advanced cryptographic hash functions. Forster, she called, I need you to implement checks for lattice-based cryptography. Specifically, look for frameworks related to SVP or CVP issues. Shortest vector problem and closest vector problem, Foster confirmed. That's heavy math, Matthew. I know, but it's our best chance. The team regrouped, focusing on this new direction. Kim began working through the mathematical implications, while Foster built specialized analysis tools. Rivera maintained open channels with experts on land, consulting university professors and cryptography researchers. Another hour passed. Jennifer felt exhaustion beginning to weigh on her, but she pushed it away. There was no time for weakness. There was no room for failure. And then, finally, an opening. Kim found something. Matthews, look at this. There's a structure here that could be consistent with learning with errors-based cryptography. It's a lattice problem where you intentionally add noise to the data. Jennifer practically ran to Kim's station, examining the results. Yes, this could work. If we assume they're using LWE with specific parameters, we can potentially reduce the problem to something treatable. But breaking LWE requires massive computing resources, Foster noted. Even with our systems, we're talking about hours of processing. So let's begin now, Jennifer said. Set up a parallel attack using all available resources. I want every processor on this ship working on the problem. Chun didn't hesitate. Make it happen. The next few hours were a race against time and mathematics. Jennifer's team launched a coordinated attack against the cryptography, using lattice reduction technique, combinatorial optimization, and clever brute force. Computer systems throughout the aircraft carrier were dedicated to the problem, generating enough heat that engineering teams had to increase cooling. Jennifer monitored progress, adjusting parameters, refining approaches. It was like trying to find a specific needle in a haystack the size of the ocean, except the needle was constantly changing shape. It was 4 hours before midnight when the first segment was cracked. Foster shouted in triumph, and the whole room froze. We did it! The first segment has been deciphered. Jennifer ran to her station. There, Emerging from what had been meaningless binary sequences was clear text, geographic coordinate, times, codes that corresponded to specific military installations. "It's the Guam Naval Base," Chun said, checking references. "The coordinates match the main arsenal." Exactly! If they attacked there during the midnight shift change, when security is in temporary transition, they could cause massive damage. One target identified, 17 remaining. Jennifer returned to work with renewed energy. Now that they had cracked one segment, they could use the same parameters for the others. The process accelerated dramatically. And Segment 2 deciphered. Airbase in Okinawa. Segment 3, facilities in Yokosuka. Segment 4, Pearl Harbor. The list grew, revealing a coordinated attack of a terrifying scale across the entire Pacific.